welcome to another episode of the Herd Main Show. I am your Herd Leader, John Wayne.
And I'm your Herd Mom, Megan.
And this is Herd Guest, Jesse.
Yay!
You may have seen a promo showing off that Jesse would be joining us, but if this comes as a surprise to you, it's okay. Jesse has been vetted. He doesn't wear it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you don't see it, but in his heart of hearts, he does love Star Wars. We checked.
Okay.
In my defense, this is like my one non-Star Wars shirt that I own, and that's what it happened to
and
have.
And it had to be today.
Laundry day. It happens.
So Jesse is a friend of ours. We met back at Celebration, got connected with, and you manage the brand Gameinfinite.
Yep.
You want to say a little bit about that before we...
Yeah, I won't go into too much in depth. I definitely recommend we recorded about a 15-minute promo video where we just talked about the community and our partnership and how we work together. But the longest short of it is that Gameinfinite is a gaming platform that focuses on news and gaming entertainment. So I'm always on the hunt for gaming news, trying to bring you the latest information that's happening in the gaming industry. And we're writing articles, whether it's a quick tweet, a full article, everything about it. Sometimes we get a cool promo that's talking about the news. I'm really excited about today. Today, Microsoft just announced a bunch of information about the Xbox Series X. So you got to check out our pages for that. So news and entertainment. We also host a gaming community for content creators that we call GI Friends, or Gameinfinite Friends, the longer version. Which that's partially how we started with these guys. We invited them into GI Friends to support the Nerd Herder podcast. And if you find yourself to be a creator, if you are an aspiring streamer or cosplayer, podcaster, YouTuber, artist, any type of nerdy creator, you're welcome to join the community. It's 100% free, and all we do is try to help support you. And whether that's liking, tweeting, retweeting, commenting, everything we can do to help support your content. And all we ask is, a little bit, just check out our stuff. If you like it, great, you can check it out. We don't ask for anything in return, so it's pretty cool. And I hope you can check it out. Two things I want to point out for you guys is Instagram's our biggest activity. Go to Instagram. Our handle is just @Gameinfinite, nice and easy. And check out our website, Gameinfinite.net. That is our main page. You can get to everything. All of our channels, our sub-pages. We have a Star Wars page that we co-manage together. So I partnered up with Nerd Herder. They were the biggest Star Wars fans that I knew, next to myself, to just work on a Star Wars page. So Star Wars Infinites is one of them. So check out the website. It's pretty cool. But we got a cool podcast planned for today.
Absolutely. So creators supporting creators is always a good deal. So check out the promo. But as for today, we're going to be continuing our conversations. And Jesse, we're glad to have you here for this continuation, because it's always nice to get added perspective.
Yes.
I don't know that we'll get too much different perspective, because I think you like The Last Jedi pretty well.
Today we're talking about not a controversial movie at all.
Not at all.
It's probably the most beloved movie of all of Star Wars.
Let's be honest, Star Wars is never controversial.
Absolutely
but we're never controversial. But this one's probably the least controversial movie out of all of them, I think. Yeah.
But nonetheless, and a big part of why we're talking about what we're talking about and the way we're talking about it is because we believe in the power of perception. There's no, to a point, right way to necessarily take everything Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's purely up to you and your life experiences, your circumstances, all of that stuff. That builds your perspective of Star Wars, for sure. Last week we talked a lot about some of the characters from The Last Jedi, and basically I took it over and talked about Luke from that exact point of view, where it's just I like The Last Jedi Hermit Luke because I was Hermit Luke when I watched that movie. Yeah. And so it's just but that's not everybody. And I can get if Luke was your favorite character, that would be a little bit of a departure. Yeah. He's not necessarily the hero in this one. He's the grumpy old guy drinking green milk.
It's one of those things where I had a lot of problems with The Last Jedi, despite I like the movie. I definitely am not in the hate group of it. I have some criticisms, but Luke was just not one of them, and I never understood why people complained about Luke so much, because it's I want to be have you people not seen Star Wars?
Right.
It's not that Obi-Wan and Yoda both went off into the hermit lifestyle after they felt like they failed at things.
I mean, why is it so?
Is it so shocking that not just any two Jedi, but the only two Jedi Luke has ever met? He only had
learned it.
We've seen all of Star Wars. The only two he ever met did what he did. Exactly. It's they felt like they failed and they went into exile. That's from his perspective, the Jedi way, and he felt like he failed. It was his sole responsibility to resurrect the Jedi Order. He failed, so now he feels like he should go off into exile and be moody about it. And I'm just like, I don't see why that makes no sense to so many people.
I mean, well, it's a very human thing to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
like,
so human.
It's like, oh, this thing I was just pouring all of my investment into failed. Well, everything sucks, right? I better go die. Like, I mean, it can, again, I guess it depends on your perspective of, like, were you a big Luke fan growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Luke. I mean, but yeah, people have to realize there was a 30-some-odd year gap here, and he feels like he fails, and he's very vocal of why he did what he did.
Right.
I don't think it's so out of character as people said.
No, I don't think, I think if anything, it's in character.
Yeah.
It just, I think it's so in character, people expected him to just kind of be somewhere else, or they had to, I mean, to be fair, a lot of folks I think that are vocal about that are fans of some of the books that came out that featured like the new Jedi Order and the original sort of Luke journey after this, where he is kind of OP.
He is OP, but in that timeline, he didn't fail. He's in the Legends timeline. I mean, granted, it's a complex, long timeline, but he ultimately succeeded in recreating the Jedi Order, and he has multiple successful Jedi offspring, and it's like that's why that Luke is different. Is success and failure are kind of factors that affect people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think that Luke is a great example in The Last Jedi of what you kind of have with you going in is what you get out, which speaking of Luke is very like Dagobah, like only what you take with you is in there. And so I think overall we have to be sensitive to who we are as we watch Star Wars and enjoy Star Wars. And it seems complex, like these are just daggum space opera movies. It shouldn't be that weird as like I shouldn't have to know myself, but the reality is that's the whole point of these kinds of stories. Is to know ourselves, to know humanity, to know the world. And I think if you don't get that deep, I think you're kind of missing a part of Star Wars almost.
And I think it's kind of unfair to criticize Luke for kind of isolating himself, giving up on the Resistance, feeling like he failed, when no one cared that Han Solo did the same thing.
Right.
Yeah,
He's not working for the Resistance. He's just back to his smuggler days.
We
He
were
feels
fine
just as
without Han.
defeated.
Exactly.
We all feel just as fine that Han felt defeated and gave up. And Han had a bigger excuse because that was his son.
Right.
Versus Luke, that was his nephew. I would feel like your son going to the dark side would have a... We should have expected Han to be worse off than Luke. So, but we were fine with where Han was. Oh, I don't know.
Well, I think you bring an interesting point that we never got to of... I think that's exactly why Luke ran away. Because of, like, the idolatry of Luke Skywalker. And he talks about being the legend and everything, and it's like, that's why I left, because no one would accept my failure. But Han messes up, it's just Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's just, Han's a terrible smuggler, and
like he's just bad at
no one
everything.
was surprised.
Yeah, it's like he's bad at everything. So if he messes up and gets depressed after his son leaves, that's fine. But Luke, oh no. The galaxy hinges on Luke Skywalker. And so I think that perspective is really important as we go in, and I don't think we're going to talk about anything that, and even the stuff with Luke Skywalker, it's not definitive, it's just our point of view, which is a big Star Wars theme. So keep that in mind as we go throughout, if this happens to be your first episode. As you're going through any of our episodes in general, though, just keep in mind perspective. And so with that, we're continuing our conversation. We talked about Rey, we talked about Luke, we talked about Finn.
Yes, we talked about Finn, and we talked about Rose.
Yeah, Rose kind of got lumped in with Finn a little bit there. So that leaves us with Hot Boy, General Get Everything Done, and Emo Sad Boy. Right?
Who could it be?
So let's start with everybody's favorite space bachelor, Poe Dameron.
Yes. The galaxy's most eligible bachelor?
Maybe?
One might say.
I think he's more eligible in episode 9 than he's ever been.
Star Wars spin-off idea. Poe Dameron in Star Wars The Bachelor.
Yes!
Where they give out space roses.
It's
Oh
just
my
like
gosh.
3 Wookiees. Finn's there, Rose is there, Zori is not there because she doesn't want to be.
But she's there to mess with him.
Exactly.
Like she's in the audience.
Like she's hitting him with a paintball gun. You
How
know?
funny would a Star Wars parody of The Bachelor
That
be?
would
That'd
be
be
so
hilarious.
Have you ever seen? There's a dating episode of the Futurama
Yes.
that I think
I imagine
is it a
would
dating
go-
show or something? I just
It's
remember there's a
something like
blob.
that.
There's a blob lady, and it's just like the weirdest. Like, how does this work? Like, if she gets the rose, what happens? Like, it's just it's madness, but it's entertaining.
Yes, I've watched exactly one episode of The Bachelor, and that was enough.
So, last time when we did The Force Awakens, we really didn't talk about Poe because I think it's pretty common knowledge now, but he wasn't supposed to make it out of that movie.
No.
Originally, he didn't make it to the end of the script. Like, he died in the beginning.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so...
Everyone apparently but me knew that.
well, that's why
It
you're
happens.
here, Jesse. So he really didn't have much to develop in episode 7 other than, he came back in the end.
He's a
And
pilot,
he's a good he's a good flyboy. So arguably his character development doesn't start until The Last Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Megan, what's your take on Flyboy here? What did you think of Poe Dameron in general?
Well, my first impression of Poe was, ooh, Oscar Isaacs. I like him. He's really good in that robot movie. What is it called? Deus Ex Machina, something like that.
He was in that?
He's in that.
Oh, I didn't hear of him until Star Wars.
Really?
Yeah.
He's in
Wow.
Deus Ex?
Yeah. He's the dude with the beard.
Did you know he's in the X-Men movie?
I knew that because he's Apocalypse.
Dang it, I was the only one that didn't know that for a while.
Yes. Yes.
I didn't know he was... Is he the guy who's supposed to be interviewing the robot?
Yes.
Really?
I think so.
I need to watch that movie again.
You
That
do.
was a long time ago. I totally did not remember that.
The only scene I remember from that movie is where he's got the long beard and the shaved head, and he's just like dancing around with the robot. What?
Cool fact, I think the girl who plays the robot in that movie plays in the newest Tomb Raider that you have to see now because
Yeah,
we're
honestly.
going to lose all of the Tomb Raider fans based on the previous comments
Right,
in the
yes.
last video.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, apparently I didn't know there was another one. Angelina Jolie's not even in it, so
Yeah.
dang.
well, she's like 60 now, so she has to like move on. with
No.
things.
What? She's that old?
I don't know.
I
She's
don't know.
old.
What? I just watched Maleficent 2 and she was fine.
I'm pretty sure she's old. Like, we're gonna have to figure this out.
We're gonna Google it.
I'm gonna break
So-
that no phone rule.
Deus Ex Machina guy.
Yeah.
Beyond beyond that in The Last Jedi, like how did he hit you as a character?
He hit me across the face. No.
Rude.
No, I was very invested in him at the point where Leia is like, this is my new son. I've thrown out the
Ooh.
old son.
Ooh.
New son. New child.
Some controversial statements.
But like, yeah, I loved his character from The Force Awakens. Just the little interactions that he had with Kylo. And then bringing that back with that scene where he's in the cockpit, just
Oh my gosh, that
absolutely
intro.
screwing with
The
Hux.
that beginning,
Mhm.
that was really funny, and I
That
think
was so funny.
I think Poe is because we talked about Finn being kind of the funny guy
Mhm.
in Episode 7. I think that role passes to Poe
Mhm.
in this one
Absolutely.
because he's not horribly in it, or well, I should say it that way. He's not in it that much compared
Yeah.
to some of the other characters.
Yeah, he gets put in prison for a little bit there.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I mean, I don't know. I've always liked dogfighting and X-Wings and that aspect, but I've been very selective with the pilots I like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is, but
General Mustache.
Poe was a big Starfighter?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
no, you're talking about General Merrick.
Yes.
Yes, General Hunkmeister from Rogue One, yes.
Yes, who you saw a cosplay of at
Oh my gosh, I
Celebration
freaked out.
Lost.
I lost my mind. Anyway, rabbit trails over here.
Rabbit trails.
I don't know. I didn't get anything from Episode 7 with Poe, and so coming into Episode 8, I really didn't care about Poe,
Mhm.
if I can say that. I mean, I don't know how you felt like Flyboy character.
I really feel like Poe didn't get justice in The Last Jedi, and for the record, Angelina Jolie is 44 years old, so basically 60.
Wow!
That was close. And, I've always said that I love The Last Jedi. A lot of the things that people didn't like, I liked, but if there was two changes, like if I could just like alter the space, like Thanos snapped something into change, I would change two things. Is I would delete the Rose character. because she's awful. And then I would, and I would also delete.
I hear
Holdo.
the flames from Twitter right now.
I'm sure they're fanning those flames in support because no one liked Rose. But I would also get rid of Holdo because I just felt like the dynamic between her and Poe didn't work. And one of the alternate things that I says is why did they kill off Akbar off screen and introduce a new admiral that no one knew and no one really liked? Just imagine how much better the dynamic would have been if Akbar had been that admiral playing that story arc. If he didn't want to divulge information to Poe, it would have come off like the assumption that there's a reason behind that would have been stronger. Like people
because
have some
it's Akbar.
It's Akbar. We respect Akbar. We know him. He's a good guy. We trust him. But it just came off as this. There's no real reason or justification for why Poe's being kept in the dark. Why he's being talked down to from this new character. It's kind of like we've all had that day at work where you get the new boss who shows up day one and you've been at that job for 5 years and they're just giving you attitude and telling you what to do. And you kind of want to be like, technically you outrank me, but you just got here.
Right.
So like, why are you already acting like you know everything? And that's what I pictured. It felt like the brand new retail manager and the guy who's worked there forever, that dynamic. And it didn't feel like it was earned. I don't know. She came off as kind of snobbish and disrespectful to him for no reason. Even though like that whole speech about how he lost some bombers, and it's like, so like in the scope of a galactic war, you're yelling at your ace hero pilot who saved the resistance multiple times over a few lost bombers when they took down a carrier. It's like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It felt unearned and awkward. So that's why I feel like Poe. It feels like the whole trilogy, they're trying to teach Poe some kind of lesson of leadership, and in this one it felt like it was a bad lesson. I don't know. That's my biggest critique about it, is I just didn't like their dynamic. So I felt like Poe kind of got the short end of the stick, where he's left on the ship while the rest go on a mission, and his sole job is to like be taught a lesson from this new character that doesn't really have yet earned the right to teach us a lesson yet. I don't know.
Well, I think in general, were you going to say something?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
The way I've always kind of thought of it is, like, Holdo knows Poe's situation. She's probably heard many rambling conversations from Leia on the phone at, like, 3 a.m. Just like, this kid. But, I think that the way I kind of justified it in my mind was, like, if she told Poe everything, he would just go immediately. Like, he would go do what the plan was, not worrying about the big picture, that kind of thing. And I can get where that would be, like, you know.
But they didn't also, like, really set him up as this uncontrollable, like, maverick type. Like, they didn't build that up. So when they essentially switch it to that, that's where it feels unexpected. Like, all of 7 and like, the first 10 minutes of 8, he's this faultless hero. Like, we don't get any of that in 7. Like, he literally shows up and saves the day, taking out, like, 8 different TIE fighters. It's like, he's a hero the whole movie. So this, all of a sudden, this maverick who doesn't listen. That just seemed like it came out of nowhere, because they didn't really set that up. Yeah, he's funny, but, like, he was never, like, unpredictably, like, uncontrollable.
Yeah.
I think they relied a little too much on subtext in that moment.
Well, yeah, I don't think that they communicated well enough. And again, I think a lot of it's just down to figuring out what the heck do we do with this guy now that we didn't kill him. So I do think part of it is part of trying to figure out a character you didn't exactly expect, while also trying to justify the rest of the story. And I think, Laura Dern as Holdo, I love Laura Dern. We like Laura Dern. And so I'm not afraid to say that I felt like Holdo wasn't what she could have been as a character.
Yeah.
Number one, because they kill her so quickly. Like, I mean, she just doesn't really get much to develop as a character.
No.
And that's a disservice to such a phenomenal actress. But also, now, and especially when you get a book later like Princess of Alderaan. I don't know if you've read it, but like it deals with a young Leia and Holdo. When you read that book, I know I was one where I'm just like, this is Holdo. This is what Laura Dern should have gotten to do, and you get a little bit of that from Leia and her banter, where it's just like, wait, there's so much more going on here. Where was this? And I think in general, everybody that didn't go on some adventure, Finn, Rose, Rey, everybody trapped on the ship didn't get enough because they were almost literally and figuratively in a box. And I think some things work, some things don't. And that's one of the few areas, I think, of the sequel trilogy where I spent a lot of time thinking of what could have been. I don't usually get caught up with that, but thinking of... It's one of those things where it's like, I mean, in general, where you're interacting with this character and you're like, oh, this is fine. And then maybe you read a comic or you see an episode of the Clone Wars or something and you're just like, wait, this is that character? Why didn't they do... It's weird how it makes this longing for more. And I think Holdo suffers from that. I think she can still be a great character if you look at it that way, but I think there's untapped potential there for sure.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Sometimes there's major disconnects between the character we see on screen and what we've gotten in literature or comics or in other media. I've just... The whole sub story arc of we're keeping this backup plan a secret of how we're going to create. It's one of those. It's an example of like a narrative choice where something's being kept a secret,
and you're constantly yelling like, "Tell somebody!" Like just.
Yeah, it's like it only makes sense to keep it from the audience, not the people that are in there. And you're just like, why? What's the big secret? Why are we keeping it from here? The movie desperately needed like some throwaway line about how they were concerned about a spy or something. Well, they don't really talk about why they're keeping it from Poe.
Retroactively, a lot of the logic is because they've tracked them through hyperspace.
Yeah. That's
what a lot of people always put out there of like, well, they tracked them. They don't know how, so clearly either somebody told them or something. And that can work. Yeah. That's fine.
And if they had left it at that, if they had gone with like, we think there's a spy angle, but they ruined that by Finn and Rose like telling the audience how they think it happened. Mm-hmm. So now the audience knows there's no spy, but they're still acting as if there is one. So it doesn't make... There's like a lack of communication on screen that's happening that's like sending mixed signals that I think is where it is. Because you're absolutely right. If they had just left with, we think there's a spy, we're keeping everything on a need-to-know basis, but they've already kind of spoiled that line of thinking for the audience with some type of... If they had just gotten rid of we think they did it because of Gadget X and that's why we're going off to here, it's a contradictory, like, they're acting as if there's a spy over here, but they're chasing technology X over here, which they only tracked them one way, but they're both acting as if they did it in opposite ways, and that's where there's a little bit of a paradox where we already know how they did it because Rose and Finn figured it out. Mm-hmm. So that's where it's a little weird. I can never shake off what I've said. I've described Holdo as she just comes off as this unlikable day one manager telling you to do your job differently and treating you bad, even though up until now you were the hero of everything. So like that's why that's one of the things like I wish, like I said, if they had changed it to Akbar, someone that we had a respect for, we could say we don't know why he's keeping it a secret, but we trust him that he's doing it. And it would also made the ultimate sacrifice at the end way better.
Right.
When you kill off someone that you've done your damnedest to try to make people not like, and people are cheering not because they saved the day, but also because we don't have that character anymore.
Right. Well, and at the end of the day, I don't appreciate how many people don't like the character because of how it was presented. Because I think that's what Holdo comes down to, is it's this matter of how they wrapped the present, how they gave it to us.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, if a lot of the things had been handled very differently, it would have been a legitimate character, a very earned character, and then, there's just nothing quite like when you're like, well, I can like this character to a point, but then no one else does. I feel like Holdo suffers the most from that as a character, at least from this film, where it's just like, because of the way they did it. Yeah. I think that no one will be able to really appreciate Holdo.
They put her at odds with Poe, and we had a whole movie with Poe. Poe is funny. Poe is charismatic. We like Poe. We get what Poe's doing. So you're watching the first half or first third of The Last Jedi, and you're like, I'm on Team Poe, and she's putting herself at odds with him. So it's like they want you to not. It's like they're writing this story because they want you to like Holdo and think Poe's in the wrong, but no one's thinking that. Everyone's on Poe's side of things, and it just makes Holdo look bad. And then they go from making Holdo look bad for so long, and then you get a 2-minute thing where Leia explains. It takes Leia all of 2 minutes to explain to Poe what's happening, and Poe's like, "Oh, I get it now. I'm on board." And you're just kind of like, "Why did you not do that earlier in the movie?"
Yeah, I to this day can't not in that moment just be like, well, it could have been so much easier.
Yeah.
No, I to be fair, I've had those moments in the office. Yeah. I've been Poe and sometimes in the office where I'm doing some kind of mutiny thing. I might have shot somebody, and then it turns out it was all an overreaction.
And then all of a sudden you fall down and I'm behind you with a Nerf gun.
Right, and it's just like, but so clearly Poe. If you had to surmise, I mean, I think you kind of already did. His development was to try, like this leadership grooming.
Yeah.
And I think you said something interesting where it's like... I
do that sometimes.
Yeah. I get this very maternal thing from Leia whenever she's handling Poe.
Yeah.
So to kind of transition to Leia, do you think that was intentional on her character's part? I mean, we're talking about imaginary people, but like... Do you think that that was really a thing that was intentional of like, well, my son's gone? Because she kind of comes to that realization. Episode 7, she's like, go bring back our son. And I think once she gets the news of like, okay, he gone. Like, he's not coming back.
Mm-hmm. And she comes to that realization at like near the end of The Last Jedi where when Luke basically says, I'm not here to save him. And she's like, yeah, I know. She's given up hope at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And so do you think Leia is coming at it maternally with Poe intentionally?
I think that is kind of going to be the only way that Poe's going to listen. Like, that's what I get from his character is like, he doesn't need someone to scream in his face like a what's it called?
Drill Sergeant?
Yes, that one. Thank you. I was going to say like Marlon Wayne's character, but like I couldn't remember what the actual military title was called.
Sergeant Payne?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sergeant Payne. That's
funny. But like, because he wouldn't listen to that. He would just become a petulant child. But like, I think Leia came at it from a different angle because of that.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing you're getting to is, I don't think that would help him grow. Mm-hmm. A drill sergeant character, a stern character. I think that would just let him be him.
Yeah.
Whereas
also just Leia's leadership skills.
Well, I also think Leia, like, when she speaks to him, yes, there's this motherly vibe you get from her, but there's also respect there. Mm-hmm. Like, he's this hero of the Resistance. He's earned respect, and when she speaks to him, even when she's, like, even in the very beginning of the movie where she's kind of slapping his hand and was like, hey, I told you to stop, and he's, like, arguing his point. There's still, like, it came off like they're on a more even playing field, like they have respect for each other. Yeah. And that's why I feel like the movie's pacing's thrown off when this other admiral shows up, that the first words out of her mouth is disrespect. She's calling him flyboy. She kind of just has this snobbish look down on like, you puny thing that is not worth my time.
Yeah, go back to your X-Wing.
And it's not even about like, I think it's just that it's about the attitude and the respect is like, even if it was like a more drill sergeant-y type character, like they got some stereotypical like gruff like 60-year-old guy who came off as a sergeant, but there was that respect there. I think he would still like, I think that's what it was. Is he felt disrespected, and me as a person in the audience, I was like, why are we treating Poe like crap? I don't get it.
Right? Why is this a day in the office? Yeah. Well, I think if anything, we can get from that, like, you know, misunderstandings aren't always reality. Like you know, the way things seem aren't always the reality. And so I think before we pull a Poe, you know, we kind of have to have a moment to breathe and think about, well, like, well, unrelated, but like I've been talking in the office a lot about like communication styles. There's a really great book called I Said This, You Heard That. And it's basically a lot of this where it's just like her communication style comes across this way, so he hears it that way. And there's so much drama created from misunderstandings. And so, but I like what you said about Leia, where I think she does that because she like, we need you. You're important. You're good. Stop messing up. Like, get it together. And I kind of get where she's coming from with the whole thing of like, I mean, when you look at the resourcing, few bombers, like, I think does make a little bit big of a deal.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, none of that played a factor into episode 9 because they just got ships from everywhere.
Right.
But
They didn't have Lando in episode 8 to say
exactly.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's the thing is it's just like, yeah, we hope something better comes along, but
Yeah.
that's
This is what we had.
That's what we had, and
Yeah.
you kind of just threw it away. Yay! I wish I had a medal to give you for destroying the ship, but
Yeah.
it could have gone better.
She was right in like that message of the like we're getting down to the bottom of the barrel of what we have left.
Mhm.
We need to think differently than when you're fighting the Galactic War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, it shifts Poe's character out of this mindset of, because he is the ace, he is the flyboy.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to assume he as a character would be in his own sauce and just like, what do you need more than me? Like, you
Yeah.
got me, like, it's fine. Because he came back and it's fine, but I think, yeah, it's meant to be this shift of don't just think about yourself, and that's arguably the greatest thing you can learn as a leader
Yeah.
of any kind.
One might say the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Or the one.
Yes. Some would say that.
You know, if they had paid off that story arc of trying to teach Poe a lesson with, there's a moment in The Rise of Skywalker where he's trying to be a leader, and it's the moment where he feels like they're about to lose. In The Last Jedi, they tried to set up that moment of realization where like he's learning his lesson, and that's like where they're in the little speeders,
Mhm.
and he like decides to call off the attack because he knows it's going to be futile, and Finn keeps going. Like in that moment, I feel like if they had I felt like the weight wasn't there. Maybe having Poe save Finn instead of Rose, again, because in my version we delete Rose as a character. Poe's the one that has to save Finn from doing that, or something else. They had an opportunity to really pay off this story arc of trying to teach Poe a lesson of
Yeah.
becoming a leader means not always charging in to be a hero, but to somehow know when to retreat.
Yeah.
Like, you get that a little bit, but I think it could have used more.
Well,
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. We never got into that last moment with Finn, but
We did
I
not.
think the ending surmises both of their points. Of Poe's whole thing was learn when to call it for the bigger picture, and Finn's whole thing was getting so zoned in on
This is the solution.
right, like this is it. Only like I've got to do this. This is the way it matters, and it's just like that changes nothing.
Yeah.
So I mean that information was there, but it's really interesting to kind of have it connect of just like, oh, that represents their stories.
Yeah.
It does.
But as far as Leia, other than her maternal stuff, any other big thoughts of Leia in this one? I mean, we get Force Leia for the first time.
Yes, we do.
In this that was pretty significant.
Mm-hmm. They do a lot of show not tell with I think Force Leia in this one, where it's just like, we're going to communicate that she is using the Force by her putting her hand out and pulling herself to the ship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which, admittedly, it was a little silly when I first saw it, but at the
Mary
same time,
Poppins, as
yeah,
many people say.
exactly. But like, how else would we communicate that?
Yeah.
I will say upon repeat viewings that became one of the like nice scenes for
Yeah.
me. Like there's just certain scenes where it's
Absolutely.
just like this is just pretty.
Yeah.
And for some reason
it's
that
wonderfully
one,
shot.
and I think it's part of the music that they play. I think a lot comes together to make that really work for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't have a problem with this scene. I know
Yeah.
some people didn't like it, so people kind of make fun of it a little bit, but I think it would have been nice, to your point, show not tell. Like, it would have been nice. We get a lot of explanation in episode 9 and
Yeah.
almost none. If they had found some ways to flip some of that, like
Yeah.
showing more, and
Mhm.
it was just like, oh, surprise, she can use the
Well-
Force, and we don't really get a lot of that.
and it didn't even have to be in that setting. Even Luke could have said something about, I tried training his mother, it didn't like it could have been
Mhm.
any number of things where
Throwaway line, something of
right.
explanation.
And so I guess it comes down to because you got to figure like Star Wars is as much for the nerds as it is for the general audience. There's tons
yeah.
of people I know that watch Star Wars and don't think about it or definitely don't have podcasts about it.
Yeah.
But I guess those kinds of moments are there for
Mhm.
them. And that comes to one of the I talked about one point last week about the whole Finn Rose, was there a relationship, wasn't there, where I'm just like, I don't care. Where like the whole thing of was this for the nerds or for the general audience? I don't care. Like
Yeah.
at some point you just gotta be like, it's a nice movie. Let's just have fun, please.
This is for entertainment purposes only.
Right, let's just have a good time.
Yeah.
But no, like taking into context the whole thing of leading up to that scene where she's in space, like the whole thing with the parallels of her and Ben, because I got very episode 5 vibes of when Luke and Vader kind of transpose back and forth as they're talking to each other. That was that, but there was no words, so it was all that much heavier. I really liked how they handled that of not having him do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like that, if he had done that, what?
Oh, that would have been the ultimate nail in the coffin.
Exactly, he would have stayed Kylo Ren if he had killed his own mother.
Well, that's what's so surprising. Surely she had to have known it wasn't him. I mean, she had to have like felt that or something. Like they were connected in that moment.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see her go to the hopelessness of, now he's gone. After that, of like that could have, for me, I saw that more of, well, that's a little hope. He couldn't pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Also, just really hitting the nail on the head of there are favorite parents.
Because
he had no problem killing Han.
Like, Kylo Ren's a mama's boy. We know this. Like,
in a choice between Han and Leia, always.
I think we would all choose Leia.
Yeah,
honestly.
that's the only way it goes. But you always have Han for fun stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, like he definitely you get in some irresponsible like ship races with him or something like that.
Oh yeah.
You know, to be fair though, even though it's clear that it was harder because like he couldn't kill his mother, like he was able to, even though it was still hard for him, like killing his dad himself with a blade. It was, I mean, even with that degree of separation, with being in a ship that he can't even see her, that was still too hard for him to do. It's still interesting to fast forward to 9 to see like who's the one that shows up to talk sense to him. Like he's like, it's not his mom, like it's the ghost of his dad haunting him. That is what it is. So like while it may have been he had this special connection with his mom, it's his dad's forgiveness, his dad's like that fatherly role is what's enough to like push him back, and I think that's very interesting. That balance.
Well, and not to get ahead to 9, but I definitely think that speaks to the volume of where the reconciliation had to happen. He because he has the line not long before that where he's like, "You can't go back to her like I can't." He shut that door. Ben shut that door. Whereas Ben, from his point of view, saw Han shut the door to him as a father-son relationship. So ultimately, to redeem him, the reconciliation that had to happen was with his dad, not with Leia.
Yeah.
He had nothing to work out with Leia.
Yeah.
He just had to come home, but he couldn't do that.
And I think the finality of that moment where you can see it in his face in 9 where he's just like, not to fast forward too much, but that finality, he's just like, he's like, it was almost as if he had this thought, like, he could always go back somehow, like, if she would take him back. Like, that moment where he realizes that she's gone forever, that's when he's like, he knows that he's waited too long.
Yeah. And I think that was the significant point. And that, I mean, that whole scene is just incredible in 9.
Heart-wrenching.
So then, now that we're talking about Kylo and Ben,
steering conversation.
kind of similar, not very similar, but kind of similar to Poe, I would say Kylo wasn't much of a character in 7.
No, he was the big bad in the mask.
Yeah, I mean, and you talked a lot about how you were like, rip off Vader. Like it was just like, it was it was kind of simple and one-dimensional in 7. Did you feel that way at all?
Yeah, I mean, he's a cool character, and
Absolutely.
and his persona, and you get that, but he is the big bad in the mask, and he doesn't become a developed character with motivations, with feelings, with emotion until much more until you get to 7 to 8.
Yeah, pretty much the only thing we got of his motivation was, you know, he grabs Vader's mask sitting in a pile of ashes, and that's it.
Yeah,
like that's the only thing we get of him.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the way to write it. Obviously, don't explain all of your stuff in the first one.
Yeah.
But it's just really interesting to see the growth of, all right, now he's legitimate. Episode 8, he's legitimate. He's developed. And they handled, I think, even better for his character than they did for Vader. Arguably because it wasn't part of Vader's story, but like, you almost feel for him in this one. Like, and I think that's the whole interesting point of they try and justify Kylo Ren's side. I thought that was an interesting way to take a villain. especially in Star Wars, where it's usually so cut and dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, this man is villain. He killed people.
Big
That kind of thing.
big question marks. Like, what did Luke do? Like, was he completely wrong in defending himself? Like, is the Jedi the right way? Or it's a lot of stuff.
I really like the progression, how we see the same, like, waking up in the middle of the night vision.
Oh, yeah.
We see that same one 3 different times, and they're all subtly different. One is, like, very skewed towards, like, what Ren saw, where, like, Luke looks evil.
Oh, yeah.
And then you see one
that
that's...
haunts my nightmares.
And you see, it's so interesting to see, and then you finally see, like, the third one, or, like, one of them that is probably closest to what actually happened, where they're both... It's very interesting, and when Luke finally confesses, like, he did think about it, and it was that moment, and the moment went away, but it was too late, and that's probably one of my favorite parts of that movie. Is just, you're right, we learn why Kylo went to the dark side, like what his thought processes were, what would anyone have done at that moment.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it adds more stakes to it, because it's not just as simple as mom and dad didn't work out. Although, not to discount, like, the impact that can have on a kid's development, but it wasn't all that. By and large, you can even actually say they did kind of try. But when it came down to, his hero, his uncle, and from his point, and that's what's always so significant, because we talk about perspective and we talk about point of view. This is the first time we see the difference in point of view. We see what Luke looked like to Ben, and, like, who wouldn't be afraid of that?
And I just got, like, a thought, like, how many different times has Luke been the only hope? He was the only hope for the galaxy. He was the only hope for Ben. He was the only hope for Rey at a certain point, and all those times he kind of
messed up.
But, like, sorry, my brain just...
Well, and so, but, like, do you think that this gives a little bit more depth to his character choices by having this kind of internal perspective dilemma? Like, do you think this is grounds for a big bad guy, or do you think that even still, it's very easy to be like, well, yeah, but he's still bad and it's wrong?
Yeah.
I think is what's most interesting about it is, if you try to draw a parallel between Kylo's fall to the dark side and Anakin's, they're almost similar, but they're also different in one key important role, is that Anakin, he saw the future, and this is why they should almost, like, ban looking at the future in Star Wars, because it never leads to anything
never works
good.
out.
Because with Anakin, what's so interesting about his role is that there's a little bit of a time travel paradox that's going in, is that what he sees in the future, if he hadn't seen that, it wouldn't have happened that way. It's the idea of, because he saw information from the future, he was led down a path that led him straight into what he saw. So it's a closed loop. Because if he had never witnessed Padme dying, he would never have been worried about it. He would never have been seduced by the dark side. Like, it's a closed loop paradox of what he saw caused him to do that. But what's interesting is how that is somewhat what happened in Kylo's situation. Luke is seeing the future of what Kylo's going to do. But what's interesting about that is that, while it's seeing the future and it's a closed loop, it's actually Luke's fault this time. It's not... Kylo wasn't seeing the future.
It's a Skywalker thing, man.
It really is. Like, Palpatine does great jobs, like, manipulation, but where he thrives is with Skywalker.
But, like, he just lets them do their... Because Palpatine had nothing to do with either of those cases, but it's just like...
and let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to draw that parallel with Luke. Because... It's a big dilemma, and that's the big thing of, like, if you knew, would you do something?
Yeah.
But then there's the question, would it change anything?
Exactly. And
that's significant.
Even more of a question, do you think that while Palpatine was working on Ben through Snoke, do you think he was also working on Luke? And putting those little bits and pieces of doubt in his mind?
Maybe. I mean, I see Luke representing the Jedi Order as a whole in this case, where, like, in the prequels, the whole thing was, if I can get the Jedi to lose all of their morals and all of their Jedi stuff, if they will strike at me, then I've won. Like, even if Mace had killed him in Episode 3, he would still win, because technically he was justified in labeling the Jedi as a bad guy, because what they did, they shouldn't have done. If they were really Jedi, they wouldn't have taken it upon themselves to just like roll up into the most powerful man in the galaxy's office and try and kill him and say you're not in charge anymore.
Yeah.
That's legit treason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was real. And so it's the same thing with Luke, where it's like if I can get him to strike down Ben, even if I lose Ben, I won, because now Luke is no longer the legendary Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, he's trying to get him into no-win scenarios.
Exactly. So no matter what happened, I think Palpatine would have been unbiased. And that's something interesting. Now that we have 9, looking back, like, where do you see Palpatine in 8, if at all? I mean, obviously Snoke shows up, but...
Well, see, J.J. Abrams hadn't thought about that yet. So they were like, we need to have a bad guy for this last movie. So that's going outside the lore a little bit, but...
Yeah.
As much as I love 9, it's a little obvious that we're just like, we need a bad guy.
Like, clearly we're going to turn Kylo, so, I mean...
Yeah.
Look, knowing what we know about Snoke and all of that stuff, like, does that change how you view 8 at all? Or does that add any questions or anything?
I try not to think about what the implication of Palpatine being out there has for the rest of the other 2 movies, because it breaks a lot of
I just try not to think.
I try to just forcibly split the 2 movies apart, because, like, this is a good movie and those are good movies.
Let's not try, compare. It's like when you make something you saw on Etsy and you're just like, this is good, that's also good. Don't put them side by side. Yeah. I can understand. Well, because it's such a big... Like, there's going to be a lot of comics and books to kind of have to...
Connect.
Yeah, because... And it doesn't always have to be a perspective that, that means it's bad and it's flawed. No, it just means that they don't necessarily perfectly connect. Now, they win by being a year different.
Yes.
Like,
the time gap helps.
Exactly, because then you can help explain some of the stuff. Like, if they had done a 7 to 8 kind of situation where, next day, let's keep this going... That just would have been insane. So at least they left some room to hopefully work with that sort of thing. And at this point, it would be nothing but theory to think about what goes on and what this means for that and all this other stuff. But I personally believe, based on everything, Snoke, by way of Palpatine, legitimately believed in Ben being the tool to resurrect this order. I don't think it's until 9 when Rey becomes a factor for Palpatine.
Yeah.
I thinking of the Star Wars narrative side, I think when he starts to feel the doubts and flaws of Ben is when he's just like, oh, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because I think, if anything, he saw Rey as more of a threat than a tool.
Yeah.
So when he switches in 9 to that whole, like, no, I really wanted you, like, you're my plan the whole time. I think that's just Palpatine pulling plan B.
I've wondered how much Palpatine was truly aware of what Snoke was like.
That's another one.
I've thought about that, and I don't think he was this direct remote control puppet where he saw it, felt, and heard everything exact. Where it was a little more indirect, where like he could feel, he could report, he was like maybe Snoke wasn't 100% like completely non-sentient puppet, because it also, I feel like it solves that a little bit, where he goes from seeing Rey as a threat to seeing him as a plant. Like, I also kind of solves a little bit, because I've always wondered, they introduce how Kylo and Rey are connected in 8, and Snoke's aware of that, but yet it kind of also comes off a little bit as a surprise to Palpatine in 9.
Well, and so to be fair, that revelation happens right before a dude's cut in half. So like I get what you're saying, and I wonder if like there's a movie. I guess I'm thinking of another thing, but I guess you could almost compare it to like Voldemort, where it's like taking a portion of his soul into something else. Like, I almost see Snoke as like that. Like, part of Palpatine goes into Snoke to create this sort of connection, but that's why Snoke is just so kind of like not quite finished. Is it because it's this idea of he's not complete. He's not completely Snoke, he's not completely Palpatine, but he's there, and I think that's the thing that saves the Force dyad for me, is like as soon as Snoke revealed that, then he's dead. So
in a very cool way.
it still works. Oh yeah,
It was the best.
That was the coolest.
Oh yeah, Ryan Johnson talks about subverting expectations all the time.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that worked for me, where it's just complete like that breaks all the rules.
Yeah.
You can't do that till the last movie.
Yeah.
It was really cool. But yeah, I think definitely Snoke is the big thing that changes in 8 based on having 9 now.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, I think that this really shows how... Because I even think Ben was supposed to kill Snoke.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the whole plan anyway. I think that was Palpatine's whole thing, is like that's the final test of how far gone can this kid get so that I can use him for my plans.
Yeah.
And so, but I love how, number one, Adam Driver gets to really show off in this movie. I mean, his acting skills is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And so by being able to play this really broken, misunderstood, semi-justified bad guy, I think it's all of the things we feel for Darth Vader retrospectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you feel all of those in the end for Vader. Never in episode 4 or 5 did anybody feel for the guy.
Yeah. You only get it if you've seen the prequels. Like,
right.
You need to have backstory and information to feel for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they jumped the gun a little. Well, not jumped the gun, that seems negative, but like they pushed that all forward into how we're perceiving it now, to where it's just like, okay, well, in the last one he was very clearly supposed to be the bad guy. Now I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great way to separate him from Vader a little bit, because I think he does, both in the story and from fans, get connected to Vader a lot. And I think sometimes you got to look at him as his own guy.
Yeah, and it really pushes, the narrative of he's not, like Anakin fighting against the dark side. Like, he's not actively in a constant battle with himself in that regard. He's constantly fighting against the light side.
Well, yeah, that was such an interesting twist, and that and that came up in episode 7, and I really liked that idea of Now, what's really interesting is the only other character to struggle that way that we've seen explored is actually Darth Maul.
Yes.
There's a comic of him pre-episode 1 where he has that. He has this experience that he's just like, I could have this whole other life and it could all be better, but then all of the pain and bad stuff I've gone through would be worthless. So let me just keep doing this until I can kill Palpatine.
Like the conversation we had in the last episode.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting to see traditionally, no, humans always struggle with being bad. Like, I struggle not to say bad things or do bad things or be selfish. That works, right? But we never think about it the other way around, where it's like, well, no, sometimes it's hard to choose to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's hard to own up to your mistakes. That was a big part of Ben's whole thing. Other than Luke, I think Luke is the legacy character that benefits the most from episode 8. But I think the character that episode 8 was centered around this whole time is really Kylo.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ben. I know that was for me. I didn't really like Kylo until 8 as much.
I agree, definitely.
Kylo Ren was a character that you wanted to keep masked in 7. Like, he was the cool bad mask guy, and as soon as he takes it off, it's kind of like, he's just, yeah. But then when you get to 8, you actually start to like Kylo Ren, the character, Adam Driver, and you're okay that he's going most of the movie with no mask, and it's like you're okay that he's unmasked, you're getting more from him.
Right. Well, and I think it also, from the story standpoint, represents the whole Kylo Ben thing.
Yeah.
So when he's in 7, he's pure Kylo. In episode 9, he tries to be Kylo again. Episode 8, it's Ben. And that's the whole real interesting choice of having him not have the mask, is this is the most Ben we get. It's really interesting. It's also, figuratively speaking, but literally we see it all come to bear. I mean, we just see full shirtless Kylo in this one.
Yes.
And
he does.
Kylo Swolo.
He does do that.
Swolo Ren, gift of the internet.
So many memes.
Episode 8 gave us Porgs and shirtless Kylo Ren.
Porgs, the pre-Baby Yodas of
yes.
the internet.
So yeah, they got to keep the hedge on the market of cute stuff. I mean, it's
really
Disney.
Do.
So
we should just talk about half hour about Porgs.
Right,
Honestly.
that would. Oh man, tune in next week. But no, thank you, Jesse, for coming in and giving some perspective. I think it was really interesting to have differences and to see different things, and that's the beauty of when we share things together and share what we enjoy together. I can enjoy Star Wars my way. Anybody can enjoy Star Wars their way, but when you interact with other people, I can't see how it doesn't help you love Star Wars more from different perspectives.
One of the things I think is just really fun about these types of discussions is just to remember is that you can critique something that you love.
Exactly.
There's this, I think the internet is filled with people that feel like you just have to love everything about it or hate it. And it's like, and
it's
people who still call themselves fans but still hate on everything.
What are you a fan of?
Yeah.
Hating.
So I think it's okay to have criticisms and also just break down and have questions too. Not even a criticism, just have questions of I want to know this or I want to understand that. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a place for all of it. As long as you're not a butt to people, everything has a place. I think the way you take things in. Liking certain characters or not liking it, maybe that character is not for you. That's fine. Maybe this storyline isn't for you, but at least you can know on the other side of this is a really cool space battle or whatever works for you. But the point of everything is to love what you love.
Exactly.
You brought it up with I can't fathom how people have fun hating stuff.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But nonetheless, so we probably could go so much further with this, but at some point we've got to move on. So that's The Last Jedi characters discussed. You can definitely tune in next week for the next episode where we're going to be getting into The Rise of Skywalker. That's going to be fun to try and do in one episode.
It'll be a 4-part series.
Yes. Unfortunately, next time Jesse won't be with us, but thank you so much for being here.
I'll be back up freezing in Wisconsin because it's snowing.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah, it must be like Florida for you here.
It's so nice down here.
Yeah, 50 degrees, man. Haven't seen that in a while, huh? So, but nonetheless, thank you for joining us and for bringing all that you brought to the conversation. Be sure to check out Jesse. Remind everybody, Gameinfinite, where can they find you?
Gotta hit up Instagram at Gameinfinite or Gameinfinite.net for everything Gameinfinite. And I'll won't see you next time, but I hope you guys have a good one.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get you on again sometime.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we know you got reasons to be down here.
I do.
Warm weather and Star Wars.
Absolutely.
But we'll also put all of his tags and everything like that in the description. You can check out our social stuff. You can check out and subscribe anywhere you find this, whether it be YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever, to just stay up to date. But thank you guys for checking out the show. May the Force be with you.
Bye.
#Porgs.